Really? Are you such a coward that the best that you can bluntly will manage after a month of avoidance is 15 seconds of exposure to a stack of paper? It could be easily. You've been avoiding it, you're obviously afraid of it, and so the situation could be that dismal and dire, and you might think, well, geez, it's no bomb to my ego, it's not fostering the strength of my ego to recognize myself. Someone who could only withstand 15 seconds of exposure to that things I'm afraid of. That's the form of humility too. It's like there is a things you could do to improve, and you know what they are. There is a small steps that you could take that you might take the world put you in that direction. And then the question is, are you big enough to take those small steps? Are you capable of grappling with the fact that you're fundamentally flawed to the point where you have to break things down into almost childlike steps in order to manage them? An answer to that is yes, you are. I don't know if it's the elite of everyone. Most people have things they avoid and they're afraid of. I would say to some degree, it's not elite of everyone. People vary in the degree to which they are conquered at. You do meet people from time to time who are extraordinarily disciplined. But most of the time, they've got discipline in exactly this manner. Through slow incremental improvement, then you challenge yourself. It's like, well, could I do this? That would be better. Then you find out. Then you think, well, is there something slightly larger and more challenging that I could do that would be better? And you try it and you find out. As you try it and you find out, generally you get better at it and you can take on larger and larger challenges. You're not after the bubbles of bliss that Dostoevsky described in the notes from the underground. We're built to contend with the world. We're built to contend with reality. You want to challenge that the best way that you can take on a challenge, because the challenge fortifies you. So you don't want to be secure. You want to be strong, and you get strong by taking on optimal challenges. And so you lay out your destiny in the world, and you take the slings and arrows of fate, and you make yourself stronger while you're doing so. And you might fail, and fortune might do you in, but it's your best bet. And people have extracted unbelievable success out of catastrophic failures. I'm not saying that in a naive way. I know perfectly well what happens to people. You're doing fine in your life, and then you get cancer, and then 6 months later you're dead. All the heroism in the world is not gonna save you at the point. But that's not the point. That's not the point. Life is bounded by mortality. But that doesn't mean that you do not get out of there and contend it, and you develop by contending, and you minimize the net amount of suffering in the world. That's something, man. There is something to do. Life is difficult, and you cannot protect your children. What you can do is prepare them, and you can prepare them to be strong and courageous and truthful and resilient and reciprocal in their interaction with the other people. That means you equip them for what life will be, which is a minimum of series of difficult challenges, and often more than that, because of course people through very difficult times in their life. A resilient person is capable of standing up to things in the face of fear and moving forward voluntarily, convinced of their own competence and ability to prevail. And so your primary goal as a parent, apart from facilitating your child's social desirability, which is a major obligation on your part, is encourage your children, and I mean to instill in them a sense of courage in face of difficulties of life, not to protect them from that. You don't even want to be protected from those difficulties, because a major part of life and its meaning is the challenge that comes with confronting difficulties. Now, the self is everything you could be across time. So you imagine that there is you and there is the potential inside you, whatever that is. And potential is an interesting idea because it represents something that isn't yet real. Yet we act like it's real because people will say to you, you should live up to your potential. And then that potential is partially what you could be if you interacted with the world in a manner that would gain you most information. But it's deeper than that too, because you know that if you take yourself and you puts yourself in a new environment. New genes start out in your nervous system. They encode for new proteins, and you're full of biological potential that won't be realized unless you move yourself around the world into different challenging circumstances, and then that will turn on different circuits. And it's not merely that you are incorporating information from the outside world in the constructivist sense. It's that by exposing yourself to different environment, you put different biological demands on yourself all the way down to the genetic levels, and that manifests new elements of you. Please check my channel for more awesome content. Do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support means a lot. One of the things that happen to people, and this is a very common cultural notion, is that you should go on a pilgrimage at some point to somewhere central, and that would be, say, like the rock in the Pride Rock is the Lion Kings, because you take yourself out of your jumpy little village, and that's just a little bound that everyone knows that is not very expanded, and you go somewhere dark and dangerous to the central place. And while you do that, you have adventures, and you thoughten, and you pull more out of you, and it's partially because you're becoming informed, which means information. It means you are becoming more organized at every level of analysis, that you are also more of you too. Look, and you know this, you're useless. You know nothing. You have not got started. You've got 60 years to put yourself together, and God only knows what you could become. The message is so much more. It's so funny because it's such an attack, but it is so positive because there is a faith there in the potential that make up the person, rather than miserable actuality that happens to be manifesting itself at the moment. And young people respond extraordinarily well to that, because you know that if you're parent and you love your child, your son, your daughter, you're trying to foster in the best in them. You want that to manifest itself across the course of their life. You want them to become continually more than they are, to see what they could be. I think that's a part of the great message of the West, is that ethical requirement and individual being in the proper sense is to constantly know that you're not what you could be, to take responsibility for that, and to commit yourself, like body and soul, to the attainment of that ideal. You can look at that pessimism that constitutes, let's say, the core of what? I think it's the core religious message, really. It's the tragic nature of the world, the reality of suffering. It's a part of core religious message. But what emerges out of that, properly conceptualized, is a remarkable appreciation for what human beings are capable of. We are unbelievably resilient and able creatures, and so we don't have any conception of our upper limits. You'll discover a little bit more about your potential as you discover who you are, especially the darker parts of yourself, because then you discover your potential for mayhem. There is some real utility in that discovery that you are dangerous. It's such a useful discovery. It's actually something that threatens you, because the first things that's a realization like that can in fact produce is the ambition to incorporate the danger into the higher order personality, that dangerousness into the higher order personality, and that can make you implacable, that can make you someone who can say no when you need to say no, that can make you someone who won't avoid necessary conflict, and that's unbelievably useful. When you're moving through life and you have a plan, a dream, and it shatters, someone dies or a relationship breaks apart, and you have a terrible upset in your career, and you become ill in some unexpected way, then anything around you falls apart and you plunge into the chaotic underworld. The belly of the wave. That's exactly right. It's exactly that. Then maybe you stay there because it isn't necessarily the case that people get out. People die. People disappear permanently. But frequently someone tragic and terrible befalls you. and you fall apart and you learn something profound as a consequence. And you put yourself back together. When you come back out, you're more than you are. You were when you went in. That's happening at the small scale. Every time you learn something, if you ever really learn something that's usually painful, it usually means that you have to recognize that you are wrong in some important way. You have to let the part of you that's wrong die. And then you have to let a new part of you, okay, so the self-imagine that you are undergo this series of transformation in your life. There are collapses into the chaotic underworld and maybe resurrections. That happens continually, and that's what molds your character. Assume that the person you are listening to knows something you don't. Well, they do. The person you're listening to knows something you don't. You can be sure of that now. Whatever or not you can get to them is a different matter. But if you do get to them, it's a real deal for you. That's why you want to listen. And to other part, my argument is because you're not everything you could be.